Federal government labor union meet again over new minimum wage. Southeast governors to meet President Buhari over further state of infrastructure in the zone. In international news, Turkish troop incursion into northeastern Syria generates global rebuke of President Trump. And in sports, Burundian teenager wins Lagos Open women's singles.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatuji. The federal government and organized labor have met again today to discuss increases in workers' salaries in line with the 30,000 new minimum wage. This is the second meeting this week. On Monday, labor submitted its preferred stage on the consequential increase in workers' salaries. Today's meeting was in response to Labour's threat of indefinite strike if the government fails to accept its demands by Wednesday. Labour wants a 29% salary increase for officers at salary level 7 to 14 and 24% adjustment for officers on grade levels 15 to 17. Labour and Employment Minister Chris Ngige said at today's meeting the government is reviewing all 12 wage structures for public and civil servants. He described the proposed strike as an attempt to intimidate the government. Minister of State for Labour and Employment Festus Keyamo has appealed to workers to shelve the planned strike and allow negotiations to continue. Southeast governors on the Southeast Governors Forum want to meet with President Buhari over the welfare of the Igbos, and particularly on the closure of Akanu Ibiam International Airport in Enugu. Minister of Aviation Hadi Sirika had earlier revealed to the House of Representatives Committee on Aviation 10 billion naira was needed to rehabilitate the airport. Ohanes the Indigbo religious leaders and Southeast National Assembly caucus in Enugu say they are scared the airport could be abandoned. The Nigeria Export Promotion Council has recently revealed that Nigeria earned more than $300 million from cocoa and cocoa products last year. NEPC Chief Executive Segun Awolowo said this while speaking at a capacity building program on cocoa grading and regulations. He also said cocoa accounted for almost 21% of total the country's non-oil exports. Awolowo said Nigeria cocoa products is rated among the world's best because of flavor and aroma. He also said Nigeria's production still hovers around 245,000 metric tons. He blamed the low level of production on poor grading and quality-related issues. 2 weeks after President Buhari presented the 2020 national budget proposal of 10.5 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly, civil society organizations and many individuals have raised concerns about items in the proposed budget, including an increase in the value-added tax to 7.5%. Reporter Dej Badmus looks at how the proposed budget would impact the nation's economy.
$33.8 billion, Nigeria's 2020 budget is certainly the biggest in the country's history. It looks and sounds great, but what's left many scratching their heads is whether the government can in reality raise the money needed to fund it.
My biggest concerns would be the revenue gap, which of course then leads to the debt and the debt service cost.
One crucial source of revenue to fund the budget is sales from crude oil. The government estimates it would be able to produce 2.18 million barrels per day and sell every single barrel for not less than $57 to meet the oil revenue component of the budget. It's one aspect of the budget that is currently generating plenty of debates, even in Parliament.
I know that our people were very happy when there seemed to be a little problem in the Middle East with Iran, which will lead to a spike in oil price. But that seemed to have petered out, which means that our projection for the cost of oil may also be off the mark. Second one is our projection for the production levels daily. Last year, the average production level was 1.8 million barrels per day. Why won't we skip it there? Why must we go up to 2.1 only to be disappointed at the end of the day?
The government has submitted a bill to Parliament to raise VAT from 5% to 7.5% and actually factored the expected revenue from the increment into the budget, hoping to spend it on infrastructure, health and education. So much has been made about the VAT increment, but some tax experts say while it's a positive development, the increment may not make much difference in terms of revenue accruals.
Last year, 2018, FRS collected about 1.1 trillion in VAT revenue, and it's the highest we've ever collected. So if you increase the VAT rate from 5% to 7.5%, all things being equal, usually they're not, you will raise an additional 550 billion naira. Now, the way VAT is shared is 15% goes to federal government, 50% goes to the 36 states, and then you have 35% to the local government. Now, 15% of 550 billion is less than 100 billion. So really, what Mr. President can bank on as an additional income coming from the increase in VAT rate is much less than 100 billion naira. Whereas the fiscal gap we have is in trillions. So this is not going to solve the problem.
But the VAT increment can certainly make a world of difference for states and local governments, depending, of course, on how well they spend it. The IMF too has backed the VAT increment, saying it holds positive prospects for Nigeria's economy, but adds that in addition to wage increment, it would trigger inflation, something the central bank would have to devise a way to deal with. One very good thing the government has done with the VAT increase is to put a threshold of around $70,000 or 25 million naira, meaning businesses earning less than that would be exempt from charging VAT. That would give a vast majority of small businesses in this country the opportunity to grow and create jobs. So, it's a good one for SMEs.
Coming up, African news. Remains of Kenyan victims of Ethiopian Airlines crash returned to Nairobi. And later, international news. US President Trump rebuked globally over Turkish incursion into northeastern Syria.
You are watching ANN.
This used to be me. But that was before I got the perfect bag. It's handy and easy to use. All I need in one compact space, just like my MTN Extra Value plan. I used to get one plan for my calls and then try to remember which data plan worked for me. Roaming was a totally different ballgame. Not anymore. I've got the MTN Extra Value all-in-one plan. If you're a data buff like me, you get extra data with some talk time. And if you like to make calls, you get extra talk time with some data. And when I'm abroad, I automatically browse, chat, and call right on the same plan. MTN Extra Value was made just for me.
More of data or calls, whichever one you prefer. MTN Extra Value is made just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to events making news across Africa. 28 remains of the 32 Kenyans killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash in March have been taken to Kenya. Victims' families and state officials received their caskets in the capital, Nairobi. Flight Air 302 crashed in March shortly after takeoff, killing all 157 persons on board. A software malfunction caused the crash shortly after the flight took off from Ethiopia's capital city, Addis Ababa. The World Bank has cut South Africa's growth forecast for 2019 through to 2021 because of what it says are weak investor sentiment and lingering policy uncertainty. Growth for this year is now projected at 0.8%, and this is half a percentage point lower than April's forecast. Manufacturing and mining have also fallen. Reporter Angela Coppola breaks down the numbers.
The high-frequency economic data has been pointing to a problem in the South African economy since November last year, from the Purchasing Managers Index to the Producer Price Index.
When you add to that onto the fact that there's demand for most of the manufacturing product has been very low. So it's been compounding the pressure that businesses are facing. And we are not surprised to see that the production data actually came out at a very low rate.
The mining sector remains a challenge, one that can be resolved though.
So one of the things that the mining sector is dealing with is the high prices of conducting business in the mining sector. So they're dealing with high costs, and it's getting more and more difficult for the South African mines to dig into the ground and extract the minerals. And we can have some more policy certainty in the mining sector which will attract investment. We haven't seen much of that. We do have a new minister now, and it does appear that they are now willing to get on the table and discuss issues.
For some time now, analysts and economists have been calling for policy certainty from government. There has been some movement in this regard.
So it needs some reinvigorated thinking vis-a-vis how do we, not less statism, arguably more market liberalism. I think the government is trying to figure out what do we need to step back from to enable capital in these particular sectors, i.e. mining and manufacturing, which are the two mainstays of the South African economy.
Despite South Africa getting product level exemptions on 36 steel and 161 aluminium tariff lines from the US, the steel sector is looking to the continent to stimulate local manufacturing demand. And the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement may be the spark.
We think it's going to present opportunities for companies that are exporting to other countries on the continent. We need to maximize that. We need to also ensure that domestically we implement plans that we have in place, plans that are outlined in the Industrial Policy Action Plan, plans that are outlined in other documents that are aimed to improve the performance of industrial production generally.
For the free trade area to work, regulators have to work together, especially when it comes to payments.
So you need regulators to consent that money can move seamlessly across border. And that means almost relaxing legislation a little, which is not any regulator's love of the day or sort of where he'd like to go.
The two mainstays in the South African economy are under pressure, and it's going to take government intervention and commitment from the private sector to get involved to make the economy grow.
The Turkish invasion of northern Syria is generating reactions from around the world, not one of which has been favorable. It is not any different among Arab countries whose foreign ministers have called for an unconditional pullout of Turkish troops from Syria. Adil Al-Maruki reports from Cairo.
Arab foreign ministers rushed to Cairo for an emergency meeting to discuss what they describe as Turkish aggression against Syria. Egypt has called for the meeting, hoping to rally a unified Arab stance against Turkey.
Our emergency meeting must name things as they are. The military operation that Turkey is conducting in northeast Syria doesn't have except one name, but invasion and aggression. It's an invasion to an Arab nation's soil and an aggression against its sovereignty. It's a condemned invasion, and the world cannot approve it.
In a joint statement, the Arab League says the Turkish move is a threat to regional stability. Member states accuse Turkey of abusing Syria's political instability for territorial gains.
For the sake of Syria and its people, for the sake of our Arab national security, for the sake of our Arabian national security, and for the sake of world peace and security, we must end the Syrian political conflict. And the role we Arabs must have in that should be fair and bigger than what it is today.
Turkey's aggression is trying to conceal behind the notion of counter-terrorism that is both sarcastic and astonishing. These claims mislead the undoubtful evidence about the Turkish support to terrorist organizations in the region and its hosting to entities whose involvement in terrorism has been proven.
Member states stressed that they must support Syrian factions to reach political solution immediately, so no nation would abuse its instability.
The main purpose of the meeting is to defend Syria. Yet Arab foreign ministers have gathered in its absence. Since 2012, its membership in the Arab League has been frozen, which made several countries call to reinstate Syria to the Arab League so it can join them in drafting a plan to defend itself.
At least 2 persons are reported killed and several members of opposition parties arrested in Guinea's capital, Conakry, during a protest against a constitutional review that many fear could pave the way for President Alpha Condé to extend his time in office. Several civil society leaders were arrested at the weekend over involvement in plans for the protest. Many shops, schools and businesses were shut and roads are mostly empty. Homes of the 2 main opposition politicians, Sidia Toure and former Prime Minister Salou Diallo, are currently surrounded by police and gendarmes. The second and final 5-year term of the 81-year-old Condé expires next year, but he has not ruled out another run for office. Last month, Condé asked his government to look into drafting a new constitution. An opposition leader says 2 demonstrators, both civilians, were hit by gunfire from security forces. A government official said authorities could not immediately verify the report and were investigating.
When we return, international news. U.S. President Trump rebuked globally over Turkish incursion into northeastern Syria. And later, sport. Burundian teenager wins women's singles.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to world events. U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw American troops from northeastern Syria has attracted rebuke from around the world. Now he's trying to do a walk back, which is proving to be a bit too late. His move was condemned as an abandonment of the Kurdish allies in northeastern Syria, who are now exposed to danger of being annihilated by Turkish troops who have launched a ground and air offensive in the region. In this life and death situation, the Kurds have switched allegiances by making a deal with the Syrian government to make efforts to drive back Turkey's incursion. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, whom the U.S. considers a war criminal, has been better for it along with Iran and Russia. Russia says its troops were patrolling in northern Syria. Experts say this is a sign that it was moving to fill a vacuum left by the U.S. withdrawal. Saudi Arabia calls the U.S. withdrawal a disaster for the region. Foreign ministers from all 28 European Union member states have agreed to stop selling arms to Turkey. This is the first time the bloc has taken such a step against a NATO ally. And now that he has created the biggest furore in U.S. foreign policy by withdrawing American troops from northeastern Syria, President Donald Trump is now pressuring Turkey to stop its offensive there. He's calling for a ceasefire and has also imposed sanctions against Turkish officials. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence is being dispatched to Ankara for talks to resolve the situation. Trump spoke on Monday with both Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and General Mazlum Kobani, head of the mostly Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, that the United States has relied on to battle Islamic State militants in Syria. U.S. Democrats and Republicans have faulted the Trump administration for what is happening in northeastern Syria. They say withdrawal of U.S. forces from the area has cleared the way for U.S. ally as they have to be put in danger. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said both Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate will proceed this week with action to oppose what she called an irresponsible decision by the president. Republican Senate Majority Leader Mick McConnell said while Turkey has legitimate security concerns linked to the Syrian conflict, the operation against the U.S.-backed Kurds jeopardizes the progress won against Islamic State. And thousands of protesters in Catalonia, Spain, took to the streets on Monday and blocked Barcelona's El Prat airport after Spain's Supreme Court sentenced 9 separatist leaders to lengthy prison terms for their attempt in 2017 to declare independence from Spain. Riot police engaged the demonstrators with batons and fired foam balls. Health officials say 37 protesters were injured in the clashes. Spain's airport operator says more than 100 flights were cancelled, and protesters in the Catalan region also stopped some train service in the region by placing wood on the tracks and blocking roads. Police say 2 persons have been arrested in the region. The former regional vice president, Huria Junqueras, received the longest prison term of 13 years behind bars for sedition and misuse of public funds. The court found 3 other defendants guilty only of disobedience and did not sentence them to prison. All defendants of the most severe charge of rebellion were acquitted. Former head of Catalonia's regional government, Carles Puigdemont, who was not standing trial, called the Monday ruling an atrocity. After its ruling, though, the Supreme Court issued a European arrest warrant for him. American online payment platform PayPal has become the first foreign company to enter China's online payments market by buying a 70% equity stake in GoPay information technology. Many industry experts see this as a challenging move and predict an uphill battle for the foreign company because of market saturation by the 2 giants, Alipay and WeChat. Reporter Sheng Ton has the story.
PayPal has purchased a 70% stake in GoPay information technology. GoPay isn't well known in China. The company has licenses for mobile, online and cross-border yuan payment services. But China's payment market is already saturated.
My habits are not easily changed. But if UnionPay and other banking apps have promotions, I will use them. Otherwise, I will just use WeChat Pay.
Our research data show that Alipay's market share in China has reached more than 53%, followed by WeChat Pay with some 40%. The 2 giants have nearly monopolized the market, making little room for PayPal's GoPay and other companies to carve out a share.
It takes time to get into the market and do promotions and marketing strategies. Most people in China don't know GoPay, so it's hard for them to get into the B2C market because there is almost no space for firms outside Alipay and WeChat Pay.
Industry analysts thus believe PayPal's further business expansion will be in the B2B market to serve domestic companies in cross-border transactions, which is exactly what the American company specializes in. PayPal's cross-border financing services can already be used by Chinese consumers. But with the acquisition of GoPay, its business is expected to further expand in the area.
PayPal needs to understand the real needs of smaller-sized companies. If they can meet the needs of these clients, they will have opportunities.
But whether PayPal succeeds or not, entering the Chinese market is still seen as a milestone in the financial sector. Early last year, the People's Bank of China announced it was opening the domestic market to foreign third-party electronic payment firms.
Up next, sport. Burundian teenager wins Lagos Open women's singles. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. This sport. The return leg of the 2020 African Nations Championship final qualifier between Nigeria and Togo, scheduled for Saturday, will take place at the Agege Stadium in Lagos. The Super Eagles B suffered a 4-1 defeat in the first leg played in Lome last month. The home-based players must score at least 3 goals without conceding to go through. Coach Imama Amakbabo has extended invitation to 8 new players in order to strengthen the team ahead of the crunch time. 18-year-old Burundian Sada Nahimana is winner of the women's singles first leg of the 2019 Lagos Open International Tennis Championship. Despite playing in the championship for the first time, she defeated her Brazilian opponent, Laura Pigozzi, to pick the top prize. Sada Nahimana is a Burundian tennis player. She has a career-high ITF Juniors ranking of 12 achieved in July. Nahimana made a WTA main draw debut at the 2018 Grand Prix in the men's singles. Frenchman Calvin Hemera dominated the final match to emerge the champion. That is the news this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and all the breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Have a pleasant evening.